Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Insider, brought to you, just for a change, by Vanishing Inc. Now before we start, I need to make a little PSA about something that's changed on Vanishing Inc. We're launching something called Vanishing Inc. Plus. A year ago, Josh and Andy held a company-wide meeting for Vanishing Inc. and made two promises. One is that they wouldn't lay anybody off, and two is that Vanishing Inc. was going to be the company to push magicians through the pandemic. We did Share Magic Live, and there was over 35,000 magicians around the world joined us for what turned out to be the largest magic convention ever held. Then we released the Connected series, with amazing magicians teaching effects specifically designed for a virtual audience. We've been through a lot these last 12 months. Our live lecture series has brought us together every Sunday for Masterclass Live, where some of the best magicians in the world have been teaching, magicians you don't normally get to see lecture. And then there's been Showtime, our virtual show series with hour-long exclusive Q&A sessions afterwards. And fantastic news, as of last Friday, we've launched Vanishing Inc. Plus, which is a combination of Masterclass Live and Showtime. But there's something else as well. For years, we have been working on a way to get free shipping to every single order. And although we're quite proud of the fact we've got the lowest threshold for free shipping, we wanted to go that little bit further. So, for everyone in the UK and the USA who subscribes to Vanishing Inc. Plus, you're going to get every Sunday Masterclass Live, once a month Showtime, and finally free shipping on every single order. If you just want a deck of cards, we'll ship it to you for free. Want some flash paper? We'll ship it to you for free. Everybody in the rest of the world, they'll get 20% off the shipping. So that's it. That's Vanishing Inc. Plus, and you can find out all of the details on the website. But that's enough of an advert. Let's get on with the show. Now, this is a special episode because for the first time, I've not only got one, but two guests. And one of them was the first guest we ever had on the show many, many years ago. It's inventor of one of our best-selling tricks, the amazing magazine Test Glance. It's Steve Thompson. And also on the show, we've got somebody who's got a PhD in magic, editor of the Magic Circular, and the bloke that fooled that bloke off Downton Abbey is Will Houstoun. Will, how are you? Steve, how are you? Houstoun.
Great, thank you.
I did it wrong, didn't I? Do you know, I even went, because we were discussing it, and I even went and looked at the trailer for Freak, where you pronounce your own name correctly. And even though I did that research, I messed it up. There's no time for pleasantries. This is a 30-minute show. We'll have to gloss over my surname faux pas and move on to the first question. And Steve, you didn't get the chance to answer this because it wasn't a feature when we started, but what's your origin story? You've got 17 seconds.
What? That's the first question you're gonna.
Yeah, that's the first question, and you've wasted
five.
five.
I was born in Dublin. My mum gave birth to me, and here I am. That's my origin story. What?
Fantastic. Will, you're a doctor, so you get additional time. You've got 23 seconds. What's your origin story?
Very similar. Born to a mother. Who'd have thunk?
Yeah. Normally, that question is interpreted as kind of a "how did you get started in magic" thing.
Right.
Yeah. But you know, we'll just
start.
roll with it. You were both born by women. Fantastic. Moving on. Let's go back to March last year, at the start of this weird time that we're beginning to emerge from. The two of you had an idea for something really quite special. Something friend of the show Steve Faulkner said was the most important release in Magic last year. Will, tell me what happened and how it got started.
Sure. So Steve telephoned me, as he often does, with an interesting idea, and said he'd been thinking a bit about lockdown, and that there was a possibility that magicians might find themselves trying to do magic tricks on platforms like Zoom. It turns out he was very, very right in that regard. He also suggested that it might be quite fun to have a little bit of a think about how we could develop magic that would be best suited to this platform. So rather than doing shoddy adaptations of existing material, we could try and take full advantage of it and come up with the best things possible for this new setting. It seemed fun. We had a chat about a few ideas. We thought about releasing some sort of small project or something like that. And perhaps mistakenly, I suggested that we could do a subscription sort of a thing. Where we would release new content every week or thereabouts, and people could subscribe to access it. It seemed like a very little idea to suggest at the time, but it turned into 6 months publishing at least 2 articles, tricks, or tools every single week for a fairly considerable period.
Steve, how did you feel about that deadline of production that Will thrust upon you after this sort of tiny little idea you had?
Yeah, well, it kind of emerged over time. We committed at the start to do a couple of months, and then it just kind of snowballed into what became almost full time. I mean, we were pretty much full time on it for 6 months, and it was very, very surprising. I mean, we had no idea how much of a response we'd get. The feedback was, and the subscriptions just went through the roof, and we got these incredible generosity from contributors, big names, piling in good ideas, and then we got completely sideswiped really by what we discovered and what was possible. Like, you go in with your preconceptions and what you think is going to work on Zoom and what isn't. And as we grew in the project and learned more and more and discovered more and more, it was just so surprising. So yeah, it was quite the journey.
Amazing. Now, I know, Will, that you've got a particular penchant for magic history and classics. How did you go about adapting classics to work virtually?
So I think one of the big things that we did was to think about the way in which you could approach creating magic for Zoom. And one of them very much is to say, take pre-existing material and then try and adapt it for the platform. And I think often the thing that you end up doing if you're taking that approach is to try and minimize the compromise. So you know that you have a fantastic 33-phase ambitious card routine, and you realize that you can do almost all of it on Zoom, apart from the bit where the card happens in between the person's hand. So you just cut that bit and you're left with 32 very solid phases. The challenge with that kind of approach, though, is that if you're looking to minimize compromise, the thing that you're guaranteed is some form of compromise. So rather than adapting existing material, we tried to say, what is the experience we're trying to create? What does it mean to do a magic trick for somebody? And then what are the things that Zoom allows that can make that as good as possible? And what are the challenges with that experience that Zoom creates that we have to try and figure out solutions or workarounds for? So a quick example of that might be something like distance as something which happens for performance on Zoom in a way it doesn't elsewhere. If somebody picks a card and I find it when we're sitting in the same room, that's rarely a great trick. If somebody takes a card out of their deck and they're on the opposite side of the world to me and then I find it, that's turned into quite a good trick. So that might be trying to take advantage of something inherent in the medium to do strong magic.
Sure. Steve, a lot of virtual magic, from what I've seen, seems to be focused on showing people things, like a chop cut routine or a 3-fly or something like that. Now, with video chat magic, you've leaned into making it as interactive as possible, like a two-way street. What problems did that pose, and how did you overcome them?
Well, we looked at engagement and interaction in a few different ways, and so did some of the contributors as well. So I think it's important to remember that Will and I worked very hard on this, but we have some, we had Max Maven, we had Jim Steinmeyer, and all sorts of different, kind of big names were contributing as well. So it wasn't just our perspective on it, lots of different perspectives. But I think there is this tendency just to want to show, and that's not really an experience for the person at the other end of the screen. It has its place. But
no, I wasn't being dismissive of it.
Yeah, sure. But the other thing that happens is people often think, well, it's just going to be process heavy if they're going to be involved. So if it's going to be interactive, I'm going to get the person at the other end of the screen to do a load of operations, and it's quite heavy on administration and process. And that doesn't exactly necessarily lead to strong magic either. And what we very quickly found, much to our own surprise, was if I had you, for example, name any playing card right now, I could just turn around and it'd be stuck on my back. Or I could have a deck of cards on screen, you name a card and it rises out of the deck without touching the deck. These are all possible in Zoom in ways that are just completely unfathomable to do in person. It's so clean, it's so powerful. So making it interactive we didn't just restrict ourselves to, it's those tricks where spectators follow along. And equally, we have some pieces where rather than the spectator following along or interacting in that way, that one of the spectators becomes the kind of focal point of the show. So if you think what you can do in this environment is you can take somebody's face, put it front and center, and make that large, and then zoom in on them, get everybody's attention on that person if it's appropriate, and then read their mind, for example. So the whole audience gets to experience all the little micro expressions and reactions of that person, which is so much more engaging and fascinating than just, looking eyes front and somebody over there is getting their mind read. Sorry, you can't see where I'm pointing. Somebody over there is having their mind read. So, we looked at this in all sorts of different ways. So, yeah.
Will, tell me about, not just me, because there's a few other people listening to this, but tell us about one of your favourite effects in the series.
So I tell you or show you?
Oh yeah, no, you show me.
Was this a lead in to showing?
It wasn't. It wasn't. The showing was coming later, but let's go with the flow.
Oh, okay.
Show me.
Well, no, I can show later, and I can tease now.
Okay, let's do that.
So I think one of my favourite tricks that we ended up developing was exciting both in terms of the endpoint and in terms of the process to get there. So on the process to get there, first of all, Zoom opens up all sorts of possibilities for techniques and methods that just haven't existed or haven't worked in other settings before. And one of the great parts of the project was exploring those kinds of things. We did that with a few very smart friends. And one of the things in particular is a tool which it turns out is very useful, but we had no idea where it was going. So we spent months and months and months thinking about stuff you could do on Zoom without any particular idea of a trick they'd get to in the end, which is great fun. It's exciting. It's sort of thought-provoking. But you do wonder whether you're going to have wasted 3 months by the end of it or not. At the end of it, though, we ended up with, I think, one of the strongest tricks in the whole series. So it's a drawing duplication type trick, but there are a few key differences between it and other versions. So one key difference is that rather than the spectator drawing something and the magician picking up on it, in this case, the magician draws something and then the spectator picks up on it. And not only does the magician do the drawing first, the magician does the drawing and the entire audience, apart from that one spectator, can see it, and somehow the spectator then picks up on it and copies it afterwards. So there's no room for sort of the things being messed around, I suppose, in that regard. The other thing which we added into it, which I think ups it one extra notch, is that the drawing duplication is something that people see in real time. So rather than the magician drawing a whole thing and then turning it around, and then the spectator drawing a whole thing and turning it around, you can set up the cameras so that everyone else in the room can see both your drawing and the spectators. And if the magician were drawing a house, the magician might draw a little triangle for the roof. And then a few seconds later, the spectator somehow would get a little sort of an instinct, I suppose, that they were going to draw a little triangle on their pad as well. And then the magician decides to draw the body of the house, and then a few seconds later, the spectator copies this exactly, and then all the little details get filled in piece by piece. So it's a drawing duplication, but it's one where even though the spectator has no idea what the magician is doing and genuinely is completely fooled by the whole thing, they somehow manage to pick up on the entire drawing stroke by stroke, and that process can be witnessed in real time.
Yeah. So, and going back to your question on interactivity, there's a beautiful moment that's possible at the end of that, which you couldn't really do in an in-person environment, in a formal show at least, where you can turn the audience's attention to that person and they can ask them questions. How did you know how to draw a triangle? And they'll go, I have no idea. They have no clue. They haven't been cued in any way. So they can actually converse with each other and connect over that a little bit as part of the performance.
Oh, God, gosh. I'm looking forward to seeing it now. I haven't got a pad. You got an incredible, you've mentioned a couple, but an incredible list of contributors involved, including the amazing Larry Fong. Now, Larry's worked on movies like 300 and Watchmen and Now You See Me and loads of other films. How did you get him involved, and what did he contribute?
I'll let Will go with that one. How did I get Larry Fong involved? I asked Will. That's what I did. Yeah.
So I suppose we got Larry involved because, as well as Steve and I knowing the things that we're interested in and that we're good at, thinking about magic tricks and that sort of stuff, we also know some of the things that we're not good at. So it's pretty clear that if you're going to do a performance on a video chat platform, you need to have a decent camera, you need to have some decent lighting, you need to think at least a bit about those kinds of things to try and make your show look as good as possible. But we're certainly not experts in that field. So we thought quite early it would be nice to reach out to people who do know a lot about those worlds and then try and get them involved. Larry, as you said, is an expert cinematographer with some incredibly high-profile productions behind him, but he's also a chap who loves magic tricks, does magic tricks as a hobby, and sort of has an interest in that as an amateur, I suppose. And so, as is so often the way with magic, one of the wonderful things about magic, it's possible to get in touch with somebody and say, I know we're from different countries, and I know we have very different lives, and we have very different professional worlds, and all these things. But I quite like card tricks. You quite like card tricks too. We're doing this project. We think it's interesting, and we'd really love your help with this bit of it. Might you be happy to chat to us? And Larry very graciously said yes, and then provided some really excellent content, giving people guidance on how they can improve their video quality, either at no cost or mid cost, or if they were going to do professional shows at a higher cost level.
Wow. Let's talk about the charity angle of the project, Steve. Whose idea was that? And tell us a bit about the charity that you chose to work with.
So both Will and I have been very interested in various forms of charity for quite a number of years. And when I rang Will with this, brilliant idea that we were going to do this project, his response was very much, profiteering off COVID-19 doesn't seem like such a hot idea, which I had to agree with. And also, to be honest, we didn't have any real sense of how big it was going to get. So we decided, we'd love to do it for charity. Now, I've been particularly interested, and Will has as well, in a field of study called effective altruism. And effective altruism is essentially the study of, if you're going to donate some money, how can you do so using evidence and reason so as to maximize the amount of good that's done with each dollar that's donated. And about 10 years ago, an organization called GiveWell was created by two investment analysts who were trying to answer this question. And subsequently, they created a think tank, which has done well over 100,000 hours of professional research just to answer this one question. So if you donate according to their research, you can be more than confident that your money is going to go to one of the most highly impactful charities in the world.
So this is to avoid the problem with charities that would have a lot going into administration costs and not much going to help people that needed help. Is it that kind of thing?
Possibly, but actually the levers of differentiation are quite different from what we imagine them to be. So it turns out having high administration costs counterintuitively actually isn't one of the bigger concerns. It's much more important that what the charity does actually works. The intervention itself has a lot of research behind it. It definitely works, and that it's highly, highly cost effective. So, for example, you could, you could help one person with a guide dog in the UK or the US. Turns out it's about $30,000-$40,000 to provide a guide dog to one blind person. Or for the same amount of money, you could treat about 200 people in Africa for trachoma and completely cure their blindness. So you've got this kind of differential between the two. And what GiveWell went looking for were what is at the very end of those differential, inquiries. And what they've discovered is that the differences between any two charities that you might well know would be in the orders of magnitude of maybe 100 or more. So you give to one charity, it will literally do 100 times more than another charity on average. And which means that if you give it to the right one, you maximize, but if you give it to the wrong one, you're squandering maybe 99% of the donation. So this is a very radical new field, relatively new field.
Yeah, I've never heard of this. It's amazing.
Nobody has, or very few people have. And so I've become very, very interested in it. A few years ago, I kind of quit my job and started working more and more in this field. And it's definitely where a lot of my passion lies, because I think we can do a huge amount of good in the world. And through the project Video Chat Magic, we raised over $35,000. And when we work out what that can actually do in the world through GiveWell, it's just kind of staggering. So lockdown for us was hugely rewarding. And, we, on the one hand, we created all this great content and had all these amazing interactions with people like Larry Fong and all this stuff, and got, amazing feedback and stuff. But on the other hand, there's this kind of, I suppose, even more important thing that went on underneath it all, which has been really, really rewarding.
Gosh,
yeah,
that's amazing. I've got all warm and fuzzy feelings. I will put a link in the show notes so people can go and find out more about that work. Show us a trick, Will. Do I need paper?
Perfect segue, isn't it? No, you don't. No, I'll
Okay.
show you something else. We've described one thing. It's no fun doing a trick we've already described.
No,
So I'll show you
I want to know
something
how that one
else.
works.
So I'll show you something else. And rather than doing kind of a full trick, I'll just show you the idea behind it so you can see sort of what goes on in this. So I've got a little piece of paper and a pen, and I am going to write a 2-digit number on here. So let me see. I think I will go with perfect. Very good. So Damien, I've written a 2-digit number on this piece of paper, and I would like you to have a little go at guessing what you think that might be. So what do you reckon?
72.
72. And is there anything in particular that brought 72 to mind?
No, I realised as you were doing it that I was kind of looking in the wrong place and couldn't do any pencil reading, and so I just like reverse pencil reading, and so I thought I'd just completely make up a number. So that's what I did.
So rather than helping, you just made something up.
Yes.
Well, I'm very glad that you did make that number up, because as I said, I wrote a number on here before we began, and that number was the number 72.
Boom.
So, clearly not the world's greatest trick in terms of presentation, but an incredibly direct route to writing something on a piece of paper and then having someone name something and it matches, or to predicting what someone says, and almost more of a utility than a trick, in as much as you could use a simple drawing or a simple word or a simple shape or a number or all sorts of other different things.
Thinking now. It's very nice. It's very nice.
So I think what's interesting about it as well is that we looked at a lot of things that are utilities, or you can think of them as building blocks, and when you add them together you can create far more than the sum of their parts. So Will mentioned a card trick earlier where you could take a deck of cards, you could take it off screen, think of one, and then we could still tell you what it is. So if you combine that with this, you could take a deck of cards off screen, think of one, shuffle it back into the deck, come back, and then he's still holding the card, hasn't moved, and then reaches up, turns it around, and it's the card you're thinking of. So you can kind of layer these methods onto each other and end up in places that just aren't possible in person. So strong magic is not the problem of video chat or virtual magic.
No, indeed not.
That's not the consideration at all, really, anymore.
So some of the material that subscribers had was, you said yourself, not a hugely detailed presentation with that method, but then you got my chum Pete McCabe involved. What did he, because he knows about making a presentation, doesn't he? What did he contribute to the project?
He does know about making a presentation, absolutely. So we got in touch with Pete as somebody who knows a load about scripting, in much the same way as we got in touch with Larry, because Larry knows a ton about lighting and all of these kinds of things. I'm actually using the books as well to hold my laptop up to the right height, so we're treating them with similar levels of reverence.
Pete will be so pleased.
We got in touch with Pete because he's the guy who knows a lot about scripting and has thought a lot about scripting. And clearly scripting is still something which is important in this setting.
Of course, yeah.
So we wrote to him and said that we think it's important and we think you're somebody who can say really interesting things about it. Might you be willing to do so? Kind of hoping that he might get back to us with, a 500-word article or something along those lines. He then got back a couple of days later saying he'd be delighted to, and his proposal would be to write sort of Scripting Magic 2.1, so the little addendum to the 2 fine volumes that are behind you, which looks at scripting for this particular platform. And to do that, he wrote one part, which was a series of questions he would want to consider about scripting and how it might work on Zoom and what things he thought might be interesting or useful in relation to that. Then the second part was inviting Paul Draper, who has done an absolute ton of Zoom magic shows and has a whole wealth of experience in delivering this kind of material on Zoom, to answer those questions in an interview with him. So you both have Pete's sort of scripting academic view, I suppose, on what the concerns and questions are. And then you have Paul's real world experience with dealing with the answers to all of these questions, giving 2 viewpoints, which are sometimes different, sometimes complementary, on what goes into the process of scripting for Zoom.
Oh, I bet that's worth the price of admission on its own. Now,
well, Will, you said it was a small addendum. It's not. It's absolutely massive. It could be, it's a good chunk. I don't know, I can't remember how many pages it is, but it's a lot.
I very much meant to say we'd hoped for a 500-word essay, and we ended up with thousands of words, fantastic quality stuff. So I forgot the second half though, which would have been awkward.
The other thing we did on scripting was we took a routine, for example, like Max Maven's four-sided triangle, which is a very, very powerful routine, and keeping the script very much intact. We showed how you could, quote unquote, Will doesn't like the term, but how to zoomify it.
I can understand why he doesn't like that term.
Yeah, it's a bit naff, but how to take it and make it work in this kind of new environment. And it was very interesting to see, rather than starting again from scratch, you take something that definitely works like that, a presentation like that, and now you distribute it through distance. So you have one person one corner of the triangle is in Toronto, one person is in Spain, and yet together they can create this amazing prediction. So yeah, powerful stuff.
Obviously, something like this can't last forever, and you stopped taking subscribers in October last year. So all that amazing content has just vanished into the ether, right? No, it hasn't, because Vanishing Inc. have stepped in and saved it. Will, tell us what's happened with the work that the contributors and you put into this project.
I just got an image of Andy and Josh with capes on, wearing their underwear on the outside. It was very disturbing in my head. So maybe we can move on from this idea pretty swiftly. Will,
I'm very glad you brought that into my mind, Steve. Yeah, so as you say, the project came to an end after 6 months. We raised a ton of money for charity. We had lots of fun thinking about all sorts of different magical things and working with lots of friends, new and old. But it seemed like a shame for everything just to fritter away into the distance, because video chat interactions, I think, are very much here to stay. And I suspect that shows in this kind of medium are also very much here to stay over the course of the forthcoming years and decades. So rather than letting everything die, we teamed up with Josh and Andy to turn everything into a book. So Steve and I spent a whole load of time looking through all of the content, which you'll remember we published on a kind of every 2-week basis. So it was very much a kind of evolving collection rather than a sort of well thought through cohesive whole collection.
Sure.
And then we redistributed and rearranged and rewrote all of it so it fits together into neat thematic sections and addresses particular questions in kind of tidy chunks. In addition to that, we figured out how we can collect all of the digital resources that were shared with people, because some little bits of software were shared with people, some things like spreadsheets or PDFs with images and things that can be used in tricks were shared with people. So we figured out how to gather all of that together and make it available, and the whole thing has been turned into a beautifully designed book. So that is very exciting.
Well, thank heavens that all of that podcasts and questions about interesting things that you've done in the last 6 months isn't just gone, and that now people can, luckily enough, purchase such a book from none other than VanishingInkMagic.com. Smooth, right? What are you both doing now? I mean, not now, but what are you working on, Steve?
I'll let Will go first, actually. He probably has more.
I was just going to say, we're going to end up back where we started with the whole we were born of women. What are you doing now? Well, so at the moment, bits of time have been spent on the book and getting that all together, which has been lots of fun. The other big thing that I'm working on at the moment is an online virtual show. So I'm sort of late to the party, but sort of early as well. It's a chance really to put all of the stuff from Video Chat Magic into practice, to develop some of the ideas further, to do a bit more kind of road testing and practical delivery, because we spent lots of time thinking about this stuff rather than doing it. And also in this particular instance, it's a chance to do a show which is going to be in a studio space, nicely lit, multiple cameras, all of that kind of a little bit more production, a little bit more of a shiny whole thing, rather than the chap in bedroom model of video chat shows. So I'm working on that at the moment, and we are hoping to launch it in about 3 weeks' time, which is terribly exciting.
Well, when you do,
April,
let me know, and we'll give you a shout out, or whatever the kids say, on our social medias. Thompson, what are you up to?
Yeah, so I'm probably taking a bit of a step back from Magic. It was an intense number of months. It was great. and I'm going to kind of focus a little bit more on the charity side of stuff. I'm looking at building a high impact charity and seeing how that all maps out. So I'm still involved in the magic stuff, but less so than I was. Wow. So it's an interesting year.
Sounds it. We didn't do this feature when you were on the first ever episode of The Insider, Steve. So I don't know what your answers to the question is, but we always finish with 4 quickfire questions, and Steve will do yours first, and then Will. Are you ready?
Well, I'm glad they're at the end because it'll be easy to edit out. Let's go.
Favorite pizza topping?
Oh, sweet corn. Weird.
Favorite movie?
Red.
Favorite person or people that make music?
Ooh. Pass.
No, you can't pass.
Ah, crap. Will, do you play anything? Will, I'm going to go with Will. I think he used to play something. Yeah. Yeah,
good gesture.
Yeah, something. I think he used to play the clarinet. I think he used to play the clarinet or something. I'm pretty convinced.
This might have just been a magical wiggle of the fingers towards something. Who knows?
Okay, so cop out on the last one, penultimate one. And finally, who would you rather fight, 100 tiny Joshuas or one massive Andy?
Oh, I'd like to fight both.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah. Could I turn them against each other? I think that's possible. I'd be like,
yeah, we could.
Did you hear what he was saying about you behind your back? Like, I don't care what Andy says about you. I think you're all right.
Oh, Will, your turn. Favorite pizza topping?
Buffalo mozzarella.
Movie?
Not really on that front. Can we turn it into book?
Okay. You don't have a movie that you like more than other movies. You don't see movies. You've never watched a movie.
I watched the Bee Gees documentary yesterday evening, and it turns out that music group, whilst obscure, did produce some fine songs.
Okay, all right. So the Bee Gees documentary. I'll let you have a favourite book. Go on. We'll mess with the 2.5-year-old format.
The video chat magic book, of course.
Hey! And who do you want to fight? Oh no, music. Favourite person or people that make music?
Astor Piazzolla.
Normally, I don't get a name I don't know. I'm going to
Argentinian Nouveau Tango.
Oh, I like a bit of Argentinian tango. I'm not sure what Nouveau Tango is, but I shall investigate via Apple Music when we finish this. Conversation. And finally, Will, who would you rather fight? 100 tiny Joshuas or one massive Andy?
Given Steve wants both of them, I'm going to send them both his way, so that he gets the 2.
Nice. Well, I think I'm glad to say that I think the content from Video Chat Magic is a bit more relevant to the listeners than our answers to those four questions.
Well, I look very much forward to seeing the book. I've seen the bits of PDF, but I haven't seen the finished thing, and I look forward to seeing it very soon. Gentlemen, it was lovely to see you both. Thank you very much for giving me so much time this afternoon, and I look forward to seeing the book.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Great.
Take care.
Cheers.